Welcome to Inside Luxury with your host, Piers Schmidt. In this podcast, we take you behind the news making headlines in the world of global luxury. We talk to industry experts, meet its leaders, debate key issues, and challenge the status quo. For more information about this podcast, visit luxury-branding.com/Inside Luxury.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me for this first episode of Inside Luxury. We open with View from the Hill, from which I'm setting out in search of a missing generation of luxury consumer. In the chamber, we discover why luxury brands are increasingly staging experiences to differentiate themselves, and ask what comes next when experience itself becomes commoditised. In the first of three features on this topic du jour, I'll be cross-examining Joe Pine, co-author of The Experience Economy. Leaders on Luxury finds me in conversation with Inge Moore at her London studio. We'll speak about the renowned interior designer's personal take on luxury and how she likes to tell a story when designing luxury hotels. In Showcase, we meet Matt Morley, the founder of biofit, an innovative new fitness concept. And finally, on today's EndNote, Craig Allen steps up onto the soapbox and dares to utter the C word.
And now, View from the Hill.
As always, we open Inside Luxury with our regular View from the Hill. And I'm delighted to welcome back into the studio, Lucy Hill.
Hi Piers, you're too kind, and it's a pleasure to be here as always.
This time, you've been investigating the relationship between luxury and what some commentators are beginning to term the forgotten generation. Who are these mysterious missing then?
Well, actually, this has become a bit of a hot topic of conversation in general at the moment. It's been born out of the publication of a book earlier this year called Now We Are 40, which is by Tiffany Dark. What this book is about is Generation X, who are the generation that were born between 1965 and 1980.
That's me.
Well, there you go. That's actually also me as well. Don't tell anyone. So yes, as I was saying, this generation, which for a long time we knew absolutely everything about, and it seems certainly in recent years that all anyone talks about are the millennials, both from a conversation about brands and brand strategy, but also just absolutely every news article, store opening, restaurant opening, everything is about the millennials.
So let's just back up. We're talking about Generation X, a cohort that were born between 1965 and 1980. Yes. And roughly how many of these Gen Xs are there out there?
Well, as ever, these things are slightly hard to map. To give you a bit of an indication, there are around 66 million of them in the US alone.
All right, so it's a substantial group of people.
Yeah, this is a sizable group of people. What seems quite obvious is they're generally sort of at the moment not really recognised as having much spending power or really being very influential in society at the moment.
That's right. We all know about the boomers. We've heard about the millennials and we'll continue to, no doubt. There's even now Gen Z, I believe, is the cohort following the millennials. What then defines a Gen Xer? Miss Dark, in her book, Now We Are 40, how does she talk about Gen Xers? What brings us or unites us as a group of people?
Well, they're an interesting bunch. Apparently, they believe they would never grow up, known to be wry and ironic, sort of this idea of wanting to save the world, but at the same time go and really party quite hard.
The work hard, play hard generation.
Yes, exactly. They're obsessed with cool, absolutely. Both with being it and people that are it. They're hedonistic.
I've heard them even described as the latchkey generation because they were born to often double working parents and had to come home after school and developed great powers of self-sufficiency.
Yes, they're anti-establishment, this group. They have an ethical conscience.
And what's Gen X's relationship with technology? Because I guess one of the things that brands have done leaping from the boomers to the millennials, and we'll talk about why perhaps they've skipped over Gen X, is that the millennials seem to be the digital natives. Yes. So if you're going to reorganize your brand for the next generation, then make it digital and make it for the millennials.
Well, I think what's really interesting about them is that they are the last generation that were born in a pre-digital era. So they still very much remember what times were like before technology came along. And they have appreciation for the quality of life that led to. Having said that, they have adapted to technology. And it's quite an interesting statistic, actually, which probably goes back to this sort of anti-establishment trait that we talked about. Apparently 55% of startups, the founder is a Gen Xer. A really good example of a startup founder is Elon Musk.
They sound fascinating, not least because we are among them. Why then, in fact, is this obsession in the world generally and in that of brands and luxury increasingly around these millennials?
I don't know how this came about. What we do know is that by 2025, millennials and this Gen Z that you referenced earlier will account for 45% of the global personal luxury goods market.
Only 45%?
Well, that's the thing. The emphasis is on the fact that this seems like such an enormous number, this 45%. Luxury brands seem to be responding to that. But it is only 45%. What about the 55%? And it's also 2025. There are a few years to go until we get there. What I think is really concerning, and certainly my advice from a sort of brand consultancy point of view, is that brands are sort of almost quite hastily shifting their efforts to attract these millennials. However, in the sort of interim, before they come into their own and their spending power, there is the Gen X generation that is currently at the peak of their kind of...
Well, I was just trying to do some maths. If we're talking 1965 to 80, then Gen X must now today be aged between 37 and say 55. So surely they're the ripest global group for luxury brand consumption.
They are, absolutely. And I think what's also interesting is that despite their kind of anti-establishment background, they have actually become the establishment. They are the leaders in big business, government, the creative industries. They are the people that currently have the spending power.
And what do we know about their attitudes towards luxury? They may be running the world, but what is their relationship with luxury?
I think interestingly, and quite conversely to the millennials, they are the last generation that really associate with the life that luxury brands promote. This real aspirational, status-driven kind of version of living that luxury brands essentially trade off because they create the goods that enhance that lifestyle. And Gen X associate with that. They still buy into it. It's still relevant for them and it means something to them. What's really interesting as well is that millennials do not associate with that at all.
So it almost sounds as if the luxury brand should have a parallel track strategy, keep milking the opportunity that Gen X represents. And if you look at those people that we've described between 37 and 55, they're going to be spending well into their 70s. So there's market opportunity right through till about 2035, 2040. But in parallel, they need to be in a way reinterpreting what luxury means for the generation that follows.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is going to ultimately be quite a big shift. But it seems that at the moment, luxury brands are trying to make that shift very dramatically and very quickly. And also
prematurely, perhaps.
Yeah, I was going to say unnecessarily. They don't need to do that yet. There's still a lot of potential left in their current offer to the generation that at the moment is completely forgotten.
Fascinating as ever, Lucy, the shifting sands of luxury, the shifting generations to whom it appeals, and we look forward to speaking to you next time.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Welcome to the Chamber.
So I'm delighted indeed to be joined by Joe Pine, co-author and chief protagonist for The Experience Economy. It was he and his partner James Gilmore who first introduced the idea of the experience economy to general business audiences in their 1998 article in Harvard Business Review, which it should be said was the prelude for their best-selling book of the same title. Now, Joe, as you know, we've been exploring the progression of economic value as charted by you guys in your now seminal book. But we should perhaps recognise that many businesses were successfully staging experiences long before the book, and that the term experience or the experience economy has become, and I guess you would be delighted by this phenomenon, somewhat commonplace, commoditised even, notably within the luxury segment and in industries such as tourism and hospitality. So why I'm so happy to have you here is really to explore what comes next, what comes after experience. Indeed, is there an economic offering that follows experiences in the same way that experiences represented a logical, a linear progression from services?
And the answer is absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we actually did include that in the last two chapters of The Experience Economy when it came out in 1999, because we think it is so important. And we knew that experiences themselves would eventually be commoditized. And we have a heuristic in the book where customization is the antidote to commoditization. You know, commoditization drags you down year after year. It's like the law of gravity. If you do nothing else, you will be commoditized. And customization lifts you up. You can't help but be differentiated, right? Decommoditized. If you work with each individual customer, if you customize something to that customer that they can't get anywhere else. So using that heuristic, we asked ourselves, can experiences be commoditized? And the answer was absolutely. The been there, done that effect is basically a commoditized experience. And can they be customized? What happens when you customize an experience? What happens when you design an experience that is so appropriate for this particular person? Then you can't help but turn into what we often call a life-transforming experience, an experience that changes people in some way. And that fifth and final economic offering in the progression of economic value, therefore, we call transformations. And transformations are when you use experiences as the raw material to guide people to change, to help them achieve their aspirations in particular.
So would I be right to venture that a transformation isn't just about the customization of an experience, but really the personalization of the experience?
Well, I always think of personalization as a subset of customization myself, but what they are both, and then customization as a subset of, I'll introduce the word individualization, I think is the sort of the highest level there. Because if you think about it, commodities, goods, and services all exist outside of people. And experiences and transformations exist inside of people. Experiences happen inside of us. It's our reaction to the events that are staged in front of us. And what transformations do is they change us inside. So the progression of economic value is just as much a progression of individualization, of getting closer and closer to the individual customer, getting inside the individual customer, and giving them exactly what they want. And that's why it's all so intertwined in our minds. It is about getting individual, about helping change the individual as a transformation.
Listening to you describe that progression, it strikes me that there's probably an additional layer one could overlay, which would be about deindustrialization. Mm-hmm. After all, the extraction of raw materials from the ground and their translation into goods and services were a function of the industrial age. But as you try to individualize or personalize the experience into one of your life-transforming experiences, how does this fit within the role of corporates in industries that generally depend on a mass market approach to create economic value?
The key there is when you take a mass approach is not to treat individuals as the elements of any mass market, but think only of mass in terms of scale, in terms of economies. And so, my first book, and really where I came up with this progression of economic value, was called Mass Customization. So the idea of working with each individual customer, giving them exactly what they want, but doing it at low cost with high volume and efficient operations. You don't want to treat any customer as part of a mass. You can't, in fact, I don't think it's even possible with a transformation, because you have to understand their individual aspirations. You have to customize the set of experiences that they go through. In fact, one of the set of ideas I'm working on now is to recognize that, in fact, there are no mass markets, right? Mass markets are a fiction. Mass markets do not exist. There are only customers, and the customers are the only ones who ever buy from you. And therefore, we need to stop marketing and start customering, which again is working with each individual customer and understanding their needs, and giving them exactly what they want, ideally presciently, ideally anticipating what they need, in a way that again will lead them towards achieving the aspirations that they want.
Does this require an inversion of the entire marketing theory of the last 100 years, where marketeers have been able to segment markets?
Yes, it's interesting that you pick 100 years, because that is about the time when, it was 1913 when Henry Ford put together the system of mass production. And we began thinking of markets in terms of masses and that. And if you do go further back than that, what you find is the original definition of a market is a place where buyers and sellers come together. That's what a market is. And that is still a good definition. But what I say is it's not that every customer or that all customers are part of a market. It's that every customer is multiple markets. Think about it this way, that every customer wants offerings at different points in time that are different to their needs, that their needs are not one monolithic thing. And what you need to do is you need to understand the market that is within the customer at this moment in time, the job that they want to get done at this moment in time, and satisfy that particular offering, right? Then you've got that original definition. You've got a buyer and a seller coming together saying, yeah, this is what I want. This is what you can provide. Yes, that meets my needs, and I'm going to therefore buy from you.
Let's return to this notion of the fifth step in the progression. And I note that earlier you described it as a life-transforming experience. I suppose the question that's always troubled my mind is whether this fifth step in the economic progression you propose is fundamentally a discrete step, or whether it's really a variation or an evolution of the fourth step, experiences. In your view, then, are transformations as discrete from experiences as experiences were from services and services from products?
I would say both, and that both of those are true. That yes, transformations are as distinct from experiences as experiences are from services, and services are from goods, and goods are from commodities. But there are always gray areas in between, and also the fact that they all build on top of each other. Transformations require experiences to change. In fact, we as individuals only ever change through the experiences that we have. You know the phrase, we're all the product of our experiences. That's the only way we ever change. In the same way, experiences are built on top of services, services on top of goods, and goods are built from the raw materials of commodities. So they all flow into each other, but it does make them distinct. And so economically, the key thing that allows you to determine whether it is economically any one of these offerings is, what do you charge for, right? That's the key thing. That if you charge for undifferentiated stuff, you're in the commodities business. If you charge for tangible things, you're in the goods business. If you charge for the activities your people perform, you're in the services business. You're in the experience business if and only if, economically again, you charge for the time your customers spend with you. And that means an admission fee or a membership fee of some sort. And so then with transformations, what you need to charge for is the demonstrated outcomes that your customers achieve. Because with transformations, inputs don't matter. It's only about outcome. Do they achieve the aspiration that they want? And so that is the key economically, is what do you charge for?
The pyramid gets thinner by nature towards its point, but did you ever contemplate adopting a pyramid as the semiotic metaphor for your model? There's a smaller market at the apex of the pyramid. In other words, as you progress up the pyramid, markets become more niche.
Yeah, I think that is probably the case, at least for the present time. And in fact, you cited our 1998 Harvard Business Review article, but the first place we ever put it in was actually a strategy and leadership article in 1997. And there we presented it as a pyramid. It's before we hit upon the sort of ladder model, the progression model that we have. And so I think that is the case, that there is a lesser market for it today. There are lesser actual transformation offerings. But over time, over decades, over hundreds of years, we might in fact see that pyramid invert at some point, where we spend our time and value those things, the higher order offerings, and forget about all the stuff at the bottom that we don't ever buy discreetly. That you can imagine the time when we basically never buy commodities. We only buy them subsumed into goods, and we don't buy many commodities today as it is. You can also see a time when we don't buy many goods, is that we get rid of the materialism. More and more people realize that they really value experiences over things. And so we stop owning cars and owning houses and things where we're just accessing them as we need it. In which case, at that point, then the pyramid does in fact start to invert, which I'd never thought about before, Piers.
It seems then that experientialism is a fundamental factor of progress as industries mature, indeed as consumers mature in their consumption. And as you say, depending on where you are in the world, of course, affluent customers are increasingly placing value less and less on material goods and more on shared experiences that can be relived, handed down and cherished as memories. But Joe, are there certain industries in which the entire experience economy theory and indeed the final step of transformations in particular are more relevant than others? You've talked about motor cars and that in a world of Uber, maybe we don't even need to own the car anymore. But if Elon Musk were to have his way, and we do continue owning cars, right, but it's just that they don't burn fossil fuels, could the ownership of a car actually ever be a transformative experience? Or does the fact remain that a vehicle is merely a means of getting from A to B and will ever be?
Well, I was in fact talking with someone about that last week in relationship to cars. with the notion that if you think about the rise of autonomous vehicles, if they do in fact become ubiquitous out there, even for a portion of the people, then what have you done is you just freed up a bunch of time for people, right? And that the time is spent on experiences or transformations. And so you now don't have to pay attention to the road like you're in an Uber, but you can do whatever you want. You can nap, you can read, you can watch entertainment, so you can have experiences, or you could also use that time as transformation. And what we talked about was sort of the notion of the movie The Matrix, if you remember that, with the construct, where you go into this white space and you basically download new skills. And that's the way I think we ought to think about autonomous vehicles. This is now a set of time that is freed up in which we can download new skills, that we can transform, that we can become more intelligent, and we can use that time in a way that could truly be transformative. There are a number of industries that you could point to even today that are fully in the transformation business. On the consumer side, number one is healthcare. Healthcare is about transformation. Nobody interacts with the healthcare business unless they want a better life, unless they want to go from sick to well, or unless they want to prevent illness from happening. And so the whole industry is really about the outcomes of well-being, of health that they give individuals. In fact, one company that I've worked with here in the U.S. called Heartland Health in Missouri created a theme of living life well. And they realized that this is really a transformational vision, not just an experience, that they want their patients to live life well. They want their patient family members to live life well. They want their employees to live life well. They want the community to live life well. And they said that we're not in the healthcare business, we're in the life care business, right? They're in the business of enhancing people's lives. And it really is a transformational vision.
Healthcare has always been one of the best examples of transformation, if a little niche in terms of the standard definition of a commercial market. But I suppose in the last few years, it's really become very apparent through things like the pension fund crises and here in the UK, the ever-escalating and seemingly impossible to sustain cost of delivering a free and universal health system. Moreover, the development of better drugs means that people will be living longer, and with life expectancy suggesting that we can reasonably expect to survive well into our 90s, healthcare may now be moving from a relatively niche example of transformation to being something much more core and fundamental to us all. Was that something you guys forecast back when you wrote the book, that health would become one of our core needs and much less of a luxury? At least in a manner that's become much more acute than was anticipated only a few years ago.
That's a really good question, Piers. I'm not sure. I've always talked about it that way. And also I've always recognized that that one of the reasons you see such of a great shift in costs, what's called costs in healthcare, a great shift in more money spent on healthcare, is not just because healthcare becomes more expensive, not just because of new technology, so not just because of avaricious hospital operators and insurance companies and so forth, as is often blamed in the media, but because people value their health more. Because it is transformed, because people recognize that if I am going to live into my late 80s and into my 90s, I'd sort of like to have a certain quality of life that people, 100 years ago didn't, and even 10, 20 years ago didn't have at that age. And so therefore, I value my body so much more. I value the health, and I'm willing to do things for that.
I'm also seeing a blurring between what may have been previously distinct and discrete industry verticals. For example, we're increasingly witnessing the marriage of luxury hospitality with healthcare. In that case, therefore, the new luxury becomes this sustained health and the desire of the individual to be transformed, to become more capable, of enjoying a longer life. Luxury hospitality seems, therefore, to be moving away from the experience that we've been talking about for the last 10 to 15 years and towards a sea change, an approach towards health and to an outcomes-based proposition that choosing to stay with a wellness-orientated brand would promise. This also sets up the opportunity for some pretty interesting merging of industries if companies are successfully to produce this fifth type of economic offering that we're talking about now.
I've got to say is that I never thought about hotels as a transformation industry until you brought it up to me so many years ago with one of the companies that we worked together on, where you stressed that you really wanted me to get into transformations. You wanted to get them to understand the possibilities. And then now today we see things like the healing hotels of the world. I've heard of leading hotels of the world and all that, but now there is a collection of hotels that have gotten together where they say all our hotels inspire personal transformation. And that healing hotels of the world is really an indicator that transformations truly are possible in the hospitality industry.
I agree that the time is now that transformations are about to have their moment. And I think that this creates a perfect storm, perhaps, where the intersection of various contributing industries and sectors is setting up some amazing opportunities for distinct new offerings. If I'm right, hopefully these will start to give some real substance and meaning to the transformation economy, which I personally have always found somewhat less substantial, if not in theory, then certainly in practice. Joe, a final thought or question. Your model has these 5 steps, and the paper and the book propose that transformations are the ultimate step in the evolution of economic value. But why did you determine then, and do you still feel that it's the case now, that this is in fact the 5th and final economic offering? Or is it possible to contemplate a step beyond?
I have contemplated it. We've thought about it. And so we go back to the basic heuristic, right? The basic heuristic is an industry becomes commoditized, and then through customization, it can shift up to the next level of value. And if you look at transformations, with transformations, one of the key things to understand is that the customer is the product, right? The customer is the product, that it doesn't matter all the inputs they do, doesn't matter all the activities, doesn't even matter the experiences that they undergo. It only matters of did they achieve their aspiration, right? It is a changed customer that is the offering of a transformation. So if you look at human beings as the product, right, as the offering, then our conclusion, and maybe some differ, but our conclusion is that human beings cannot be commoditized. Human beings are inherently unique and have inherent value, and therefore they resist that same type of commoditization as the other offerings do. And if you look then at customization, what happens when you customize a transformation? And we thought about this is that you get anything more than a transformation. And we couldn't see anything pop out in that regard. It seems that all it is further and further and higher levels of transformation. In fact, the one thing we thought of is if you could customize something that is so perfect for an individual, right, exactly the transformation that they need at this moment in time, then the only thing that would be higher level would be perfection itself, that you would perfect human beings. And there we don't think that's the province of economic man, that's the province of God. And so that's why we said that the transformations are the 5th and final economic offering.
It must be interesting for you guys as the authors, the protagonists, and the promoters of the experience economy theory that it's taken some 20 years, well, I guess you could argue maybe 15, for your principles to really gain traction until today, when we see nearly every company across industries talking about designing and staging experiences. Do you think that it will take as long again for the concept of transformations to take root as fundamentally within companies and brands?
I do. And I get asked all the time, when are you going to write a book on transformations? And so far we've resisted it because we didn't think the world was ready for it. That people are not used to paying for outcomes as opposed to, admission fees for experiences. But, it is starting to happen. And the other thing is that we may have figured out what is to transformations as authenticity is to experiences. The book that my partner Jim Gilmore and I came out with in 2007 was called Authenticity, because we recognized that in the experience economy, people increasingly question what is real and what is not. So authenticity basically has become a new consumer sensibility, a primary buying criteria by which people choose who to buy from and what to buy. And so one of the questions, well, what is that to transformations? Is there another sensibility that might be out there? And we're not sure yet. But my proposal right now is, in fact, that it is meaning. That people now, and you can certainly see this happening, that people increasingly seek meaning in what they buy. And that can apply to any economic offering, not just transformations. But they're looking for meaning in what they buy. They're looking for a higher purpose of what they can contribute in the world through their economic activity. And so if that's the case, then it may be time to start thinking about doing a full book on transformations, understanding it even more, which hopefully then will set the stage for the next couple of decades of companies working on it.
Oh, there's definitely a vacuum looking to be filled, and I'm not surprised that you raise meaning, because there are a number of people writing on the meaningful economy.
Yep.
Others are starting to promote the whole construct of purpose, which I guess you can read as a proxy for meaning. And then there's Claudia Roth, actually coincidentally a former senior executive with leading hotels, and I think involved in the background with those healing hotels you mentioned, and who I'll be speaking to next time. Claudia talks about soul luxury, which again places purpose and meaning at the center of its philosophy. So I think there's definitely an appetite amongst the thought leaders, at least, for a new sensibility or currency. But it's very interesting to hear you proposing meaning as a parallel sensibility to authenticity and the experience economy.
Right. A good way to put it, on par with it. And we don't think it's a meaning economy or a purpose economy, because economies are based off of economic offerings. But it is certainly an economy where meaning comes to the fore, where meaning is what people are seeking in the economic purchases that they make. So I think it's very copacetic with those concepts.
Joe Pine, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your thought-provoking contributions. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon and continuing, meanwhile, to monitor these transformational developments closely.
Thank you, Piers. I really enjoyed it.
And now for our regular spot where we talk to leaders on luxury.
Today, speaking from her new studio in West London, I'm joined by Inge Moore, the acclaimed South African hospitality designer, who until late 2016 headed up the European office of Hirsch Bedner Associates. Then, with business partner Nathan Hutchins, Inge founded Musa Lab, a new specialist design studio which they have created to focus exclusively on one-of-a-kind luxury projects. Inge, welcome to Inside Luxury.
Thanks.
Inge, you've been responsible for an enviable roster of glamorous hotel, spa, restaurant and residential designs, and yet I notice you talk a lot about your role being to inject the somewhat more basic qualities of comfort and sensuality into what can otherwise become merely rigid and sterile boxes. Tell me a bit more about that design philosophy.
I think luxury is the things that aren't necessary. But what is necessary in life is to go away feeling wonderful about something, being comfortable. Comfort is like prime number one. If you want to sit down at a dining room table, do you want to be comfortable? You'll remember that meal more. You can kind of really relax. So I think in hospitality, people focus so much on just what you see, but it's not just what you see, it's how it feels and what you remember about it.
So you're talking about using environments and design, but also materials and finishes to generate within people a different reaction and feeling to the space that they're in. Is this a different take on luxury design and even the way that you see hospitality today?
I think expensive things are almost kind of dated, like there's too many of them around. What is really special now, if somebody's made something or there's kind of, you can feel the patina of the material in the piece of furniture you're sitting at or the table you're touching. The things around you need to be kind of crafted, which makes them much more unique, or kind of one-off found items. It doesn't need to be an expensive piece, but again, it needs to have a touch, a feel, a sense to it, something that kind of speaks to your senses. So we're going right back to basics, I think.
And does that suggest, therefore, that you'd prefer to commission individual and handmade pieces when you're furnishing a bedroom, for example? And if that is the case, how do you scale that up for a hotel that might have 200 or even 300 keys?
Well, I think you can focus on different areas. Obviously, if there's 300 guest rooms, it's going to be more manufactured. But even within the world of manufacturing for hotels, there's lots of studios that can do really interesting things that aren't these big furniture factories that just turn things out. So it's very much kind of shopping and finding the right manufacturers that are fit for purpose.
Tell me, was the thinking behind your new studio to position yourselves away from those larger scale hotel projects and to focus instead on those where there would be greater opportunity to conceptualize and design with a more, let's say, curatorial and residential approach?
Well, I really don't mind if it's a bigger hotel or a small hotel. They still need, the wonderful story, but kind of, I think the new luxury, real luxury now is the smaller properties. If you think about what luxury is something that's not necessary. a small place is often can be much more interesting, and you can do much more attention to detail because you can find those more special pieces.
I've just heard you use that word story, and it does seem to be a recurring theme in what I've read about and seen of your work. I'm keen to understand how you set about finding the story of a place and then dramatizing that physically in your design scheme for the space.
That's the magic about what I love, what I do. Every building, every location, there's always like so many cues, and it's kind of really gathering this information. And I spend a lot of time kind of researching people that have been there, materials, and kind of to weaving the story then to make something really interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it, that we've used that foraging metaphor, because in so many fields of luxury today, the discourse is more and more defined by the authentic and the artisanal. In fine dining, if it's not foraged or at least farm to fork, it won't cross the pass. How do you manage to install those same qualities of authenticity and craft into your work as an interior designer?
It's like foraging for mushrooms. I'm foraging for stories, finding different things to weave together, which then create those memories again for the clientele that go there. Even in a larger scale, it's finding, the piece of artwork that's really interesting, even if you then kind of commission it, one original, and then have those reproduced, it's still particular to the property. Sourcing kind of interesting furniture manufacturers, sourcing, even just wonderful plants that are displayed. So it's kind of finding those local points and just kind of really highlighting them and making them the stars.
I think it was Rosewood some 25 years ago that first coined the idea of the sense of place. And there's barely a brand today that won't say the same thing.
That's become an overused terminology.
It's still important, though, isn't it, to establish that connection to the spirit of the place and with the communities that have made their home around it. But how do you rise above the cliche of I'm going to deliver yet another genuine sense of place?
By digging deeper and foraging not for the kind of thing you would think of first, but by scratching beneath the surface and finding those kind of unexplored or unnoticed people.
Inge, you were born in South Africa, where your parents have a farm, and you describe yourself as a country girl at heart. I guess this practice of foraging on the land, therefore, of digging deep for inspiration must be somewhat innate. What of your African origins are you able to bring to a European or even a global perspective on design today? And I guess I'm asking, how useful are your roots?
I think it's hugely useful. I think it's a can-do attitude. It's kind of, you don't take no for an answer. There'll always be another answer.
That must be helpful when you're working hard to bring projects into a tight budget. It perhaps gives you the freedom to assemble or even make something if you can't afford to purchase a designer original from the traditional suppliers who'll no doubt be charging a big ticket price. Does the self-reliance and creativity that comes from your South African DNA help in those circumstances?
Yeah, I think that's really been a contributing factor of my success.
I suspect that you could answer this last question differently on any given day of the year, and you've already provided me with a few clues. But today, Inge, what does luxury mean to you?
For me personally, luxury is time to do things that I want to do. I think today we've never got enough time to do things, to spend time with family. I think nature is luxury, so kind of space, being out there, having just kind of openness around you. I also think convenience is luxury. If it's something that's easy to get to, accessibility, and anything with innate beauty.
Nature and innate beauty. That's a great place to leave it. Inge Moore, thank you very much for being our leader on luxury, and I look forward to having you on the show again soon.
That'd be great. Super.
Up next, Showcase.
Green exercise environments and handmade equipment crafted from timber, cotton and rope, to which add a healthy dose of vitamin nature. It all adds up to exercise squared, or so claims biofit, a disruptive entrant into the premium fitness arena. But is this simply the latest gym craze, or could biofit signal the emergence of an innovative and altogether more sustainable approach to fitness? Well, to find out more, I'm joined by Matt Morley, founder and, judging by the videos on their website, the chief demonstrator of biofit. Matt, welcome to Inside Luxury.
Thanks for having me.
In a nutshell then, what is your elevator pitch?
The name itself, biofit, comes from organic fitness or fitness for life. We're really looking to reimagine the modern day gym experience. We try to bring nature back into the equation by designing indoor or outdoor nature-inspired biophilic gyms. We train coaches in our own natural fitness method, and we offer gym licenses using the biofit brand IP. 3 pillars, essentially. When you piece those 3 together, the idea is that it becomes a gym experience with added health and wellness benefits. So it's a functional gym that is having an impact on a client's health.
Well, that sounds great, but where can one actually find biofit today?
So I set the company up in 2015 after a year of research and development. I then spent 2016 exploring various ways to take it to market through partnerships with existing brands, business partners, investors. That then gave the first signing for a studio, so an independent studio that's based in Calgary in Canada. So at the moment, that is the sort of primary physical space, and then we have coaches in London, Barcelona, and obviously Calgary, who are certified in the biofit method.
You mentioned various forms of partnership there. Can you explain a little more how the business model works?
Yeah, it's essentially a sort of franchise light, which is a license model. Having a portfolio of gyms does not require necessarily to own all of those gyms. By this model, it allows me to create a concept and then work with a local partner who wants to sort of essentially buy into that concept and set it up for themselves.
So you offer a turnkey solution to your partners. Which kind of developers then make a good fit for biofit?
Individual entrepreneurs or investors, typically with some exposure already to natural fitness or to the fitness world, but with a pining for something more. Just as interesting as looking at residential real estate, hotels, spas, as well as office gyms.
So really, wherever a gym may be found today, you see biofit providing an alternative solution to that fitness offering.
It's an alternative solution. I think it's where businesses have an existing understanding or awareness of the benefits of contact with nature, or just like thinking in a slightly different way. I mean, take, for example, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. They're all designing their headquarters and their offices in this way, so that they're integrating natural materials and green spaces and fresh air and all the same things that I'm thinking about. They're doing that in their offices already to keep their employees happy, to attract top talent and retain the top talent. I'm simply applying those same principles to what is often a forgotten corner of a hotel or a non-existent piece of an office design mix.
So was it your intention for biofit to jump on this biophilic wave, or has the rise of these practices in businesses more generally just been a happy coincidence?
It actually came the other way around. It was more my seeing that there was nothing along these lines and a number of roads in my own life taking me in that direction. So I was working in-house for a large mixed-use real estate development on the Adriatic coast, surrounded by nature, mountains, sea, training outdoors. So the Adriatic coast was building on 3 or 4 years in Cape Town, South Africa, where I was also exposed to the benefits of being outdoors. If you combine the skill set plus my personal interest and passion in this way of keeping fit, and eventually the fitness side started to become almost something I couldn't suppress any longer, where that 60 minutes a day just wasn't enough.
You appear to be distinguishing biofit through the physical environments and the natural equipment, much of which is created as bespoke pieces or commissioned from specialist suppliers. Is this a deliberate strategy to establish a premium positioning? And if so, is that reflected in the price of participating in the biofit way of fitness?
What I see happening in the market around me is a lot of activity around one space, but there are a number of different twists or perspectives on it. So, for example, there is the Delos Well building standard that tends to talk more in terms of wellness and health. There are then green building standards and sustainability standards. There are ancestral health approaches to healthy lifestyles. They all interconnect. I'm sitting within those various perspectives on how we can create or how we can modify 21st century urban life. I'm much more interested in the concept of vitamin nature and the mood enhancing positive benefits of creating a gym experience that cares for the planet, that respects where we've come from, and that offers a green, healthy version of the workout experience.
This all sounds more like the Tesla school of luxury than Bentley's, more Soneva or Six Senses than Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton. Of course, there are other elite wellness propositions out there. One can think of Bodyism and Equinox, I suppose, but this sounds as if its aspiration is somewhat more enlightened.
I hope so. While the fitness market itself has been largely salami sliced over recent years, everybody taking a different piece, I guess it's, from my perspective, trying to step outside of that melee and take a more elemental approach that should feel less like a trend and more something that just feels innately good and positive for a user. Just as your office or your home could connect you in some way to nature, I'm really trying to do that with the gym. It's premium rather than high-end luxury.
Now, listening to you describe biofit and the biophitic principles not just of design, but of living, is the connection with nature that people are yearning for today a reaction to the cramped urban lives we're increasingly having to live as cities continue to grow and grow? And if so, I wonder whether there may actually be an even bigger idea behind biofit. Could fitness perhaps be just the first expression of your idea? And could we see your bio brand doing other things beyond the fitness studio model in the future?
So there's two parts to that, both of which are very interesting for me. The first part is obviously developing biofit itself, which there is a long way to go. There's then the training method itself that can be taught separately via weekend workshops, seminars, certifications, and so on. There are kids and senior programs that I have in the works, and it would make sense to develop my own equipment range. Then, a slightly bigger picture, whether this is via the biofit brand itself or via a evolution-friendly concept, which is my tagline at the moment, but it would be applying those same principles, sort of nature-first, health and wellness-oriented design to other projects, such as residential real estate, or a co-working office, for example. I'm sure there's lots that could be done to create a health-oriented co-working office that was designed to enable its users to be as productive as possible during the day.
Talking about productivity, starting biofit must have been quite a change of gear from one day being the consultant that comes up with ideas, develops and incubates them for clients, to now actually becoming the organization that has to take your own idea to market. What challenges have you encountered moving from instigator to the implementer?
Definitely confronting my own weaknesses and having to be very honest with myself about what I enjoy doing, what I'm good at, what I have to do, and what can or should be outsourced when budget allows. I'd say adapting from a luxury brand or big budget approach to a self-funded initiative where there's that tension between wanting to create a premium product and experience and having limited budget. Luxury brand management is about avoiding compromise 99.999% of the time and just delivering a consistent product and experience across every channel and platform you have available to you. That's what makes the difference. When you set up on your own, it's just not always possible. Yeah, I mean, there's that constant voice in the back of your head. Okay, should I quit? How long do I keep going? How much money do I put in? How low can my coffers go before I need some market feedback? For sure, I've had to, first of all, get my head around a 5-year plan. And now I'm thinking very much in terms of, a 10-year plan. This is something that I enjoy. Getting the first one up and running has been the most rewarding experience of my life so far, and I hope to do many more. Am I positioned in the right place to capitalize on the next 5 to 10 years of growth within this particular sector of the market? And, I still believe that to be the case, and I'm still convinced there's 100 gyms in me.
Matt, it certainly sounds like you've been on a fascinating journey over the last 2 years. Very many congratulations on the Calgary studio, and we look forward to watching biofit continue to develop, both as a concept and as a brand. Matt Morley, founder of biofit, thank you very much for being our showcase brand today.
Thank you.
And so to our regular endnote with luxury commentator Craig Allen.
The C word. There was a time when you didn't hear it very much. It was just too loaded and could cause offence. But times change. So here we go, I'm just going to come out with it. Craft. It's always been a tricky word, but these days its stock seems to be on the up. Of course it can carry many different values and span the whole spectrum from pejorative to laudatory. While frequently used as a simple synonym for making something, it's more often now deployed to imply skill, experience, technical ability, coupled with the warm evocation of the worthy artisan, that knotty-handed son or daughter of toil nobly keeping alive practices threatened by the modern world. Only just in time have these dying arts been saved from the onslaught of the machines, those instruments of mass production. It's part a search for authenticity, but also a willful regression to a supposedly happier time, an evocation of a simpler age where honest labour was appreciated, before the spectre of Blake's dark satanic mills heralded the depersonalisation of the industrial age. The English arts and crafts tradition was, of course, the embodiment of this well-meaning sentimentality. Nonetheless, craft has become a prefix of validation that can be attached to all sorts of products and activities. Craft beers, craft baking, craft gin, craft furniture. It has become part of the hipster lexicon too. Those beardy types in their robust workwear set great store by their manual dexterity. But here's a new trend. Craft is currently being expropriated for its value connotation by certain luxury goods companies, whose production is not, for the most part, reliant on handwork, but rather more on mechanical or, dare we say, digital means of production. Is this a reaction to the massification of luxury? Craft, in its recent sense, at least, reads as offering refinement, achievement levels of intricacy and precision that are still relatively rare. The implied claim is that all of this is the exclusive province of handwork, but of course in reality this is increasingly less the case. Computer numerically controlled manufacturing tools and robotics are easily capable of this, and with a consistency and speed that cannot be matched on the workbench. However, it's the apparent humanization of such skills which holds the emotional resonance. But is this nostalgia merely being harnessed for the benefit of brand positioning, a co-opting of the validity of time-honed skills in order to charge up the experiential credentials of the sponsoring brand? The more interesting development, however, might be how this is leading to a new type of relationship between craftspeople and the luxury brands, but moreover with the means of production itself. I will leave the last word to the fashion designer Alice Archer. All my work is developed on a computer. I translate hand embroidery stitches, techniques and textures to the digital embroidery software. I program every single stitch. I've come to see the future of craft, not in the perpetuation of traditional industries, but in the refinement of any given technique, mechanical or otherwise, such that it produces something desirable. Now, I would suggest this might be something genuinely exciting. Rather than focusing on reviving the practices of rural communities or lamenting the decline of small-scale artisanal handcrafting, should the luxury industries look to see how technology can bring hand and machine together in a new union?
On the next episode of Inside Luxury,
I'll be speaking to Lucy Hill in our regular View from the Hill about branded content and the contribution that content makes to the communication of luxury brands. In the chamber, we meet Claudia Roth, the founder of Soul Luxury, who believes that meaning and purpose is the new heart of luxury. Our leader on luxury is Neil Jacobs, the CEO of Six Senses Resorts and Spas. In Showcase, we feature Caramila, an up-and-coming new luxury brand of fur. And our regular note is our very own Craig Allen, talking about the backlash that local communities are having against tourists who increasingly invade their special destinations and locations.
we hope you've enjoyed listening to Inside Luxury, and will take a minute to subscribe and to rate us on iTunes or your favourite podcast player.